is now the leading provider of person-centered content to the senior living market and serves over 3,000 assisted independent living, skilled nursing, and memory centers. We're delighted that they've joined with two of our member CEOs today who will be sharing their experiences with IN2L. And with that, I will turn it over to Jack York, our host today. Jack.
All right, thank you, Charlotte. I feel like I have Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig on as my co-presenters. It doesn't really get any better than this. And what we're talking about is a very serious topic, I think, when it comes to engagement. But we do want to have some fun with it. Kevin and Dave and I have been friends for a long time, and everything is so serious for good reason that I don't want anyone to take our banter that we're not taking things seriously, but it's also, I think, nice to smile a little bit through all the tough work that everybody's doing, and looking forward to the show. So, before I introduce, actually, you know what it is? I'll start with the introductions, because these guys they deserve their moment in the sun. I'm going to start with Dave Gehm, President and CEO of Wellspring Lutheran Services, previously Lutheran Homes of Michigan, for nearly 25 years. He looks so young. It's hard to believe that he's actually been a CEO there for 25 years. Since 1893, Wellspring Lutheran Services has been caring for Michigan seniors and their caregivers. Wellspring provides a complete array of senior services across the continuum of care, health and home care, hospice, respite, housing, assisted living, memory loss, skilled nursing, and rehab services. Wellspring Lutheran Services employs over 1,500 people across the state of Michigan and touches 15,000 lives with services and care each year. I love the work that Dave has done, integrating older adults with youth, the creativity. And if you ever want to hear the Grand Funk Railroad sung in an incredible key, I recommend a one-on-one meeting with Dave to have him provide that for you. So Kevin McFeely, we're moving to the West Coast now. President and CEO of Tacoma Lutheran Retirement Community. From a personal standpoint, Kevin embraced IN2L, probably 15, 16 years ago. In our early days, I have such an appreciation of that. Tacoma Lutheran's been around since 1938. This not-for-profit life plan community offers a range of services, including independent living, assisted living, rehab, long-term care, and memory care. Employ over 300 staff who care for 375 seniors who call their home in Tacoma, Washington. And again, Kevin and Dave, great to have you guys on. I'm going to talk a little bit at the beginning, but really this is much more the two of your shows than mine. So, Elisa, is there a way to kind of hop over to my slides right now? Great. So first of all, we have this whole world of engagement that all of a sudden, with just the realities of the pandemic, has caused so much grief and so much pain of keeping people disconnected. So let's go to the first slide. What have we become? We have become the Jetsons. All the years of watching that little half telephone, half television piece of technology. Look at the creative ways that we're embracing that right now. I'll talk about a couple things that we see around the country. The next slide you'll see is a resident-driven live stream. The gentleman in the top center, Jack Cumming, that's from a front porch community in California. He, on his own, set up a live stream for the front porch residents that every day at 3 o'clock, they use that as a way to just click. Whether it's from a phone or from any kind of device, you're able to just click and be part of a group conversation. It's been fascinating to see some of the resident-driven experiences that have come out of this in terms of the integration of technology. This next picture, this clip you're going to see, and before you launch the clip, real quick, this is from a couple years ago, but it's so relevant today that this is a husband and wife at a life plan community in Colorado. Their grandson is in Colorado, or is in California, and the elementary school teacher sends the lesson plan of their class, and they go ahead and hit the clip. You'll see how they engage with it.
Yeah. Sorry, I was ripping on the cat's ear. It is 6 now.
So you're able to see through just that technology a way to keep of families connected. And I think now there's so many ways to take advantage of things like this. If you've got maybe Vietnam veterans, Korean War veterans in your community, hook up with the elementary school. They're trying to find their way as well through this. So it's great to see that kind of thing in action. And then I'm not sure if any of you have embraced horse visits yet, but this is a Life Plan community, Emmanuel, just outside of Omaha, Nebraska, and one of their staff has works for their husband works at a horse farm, and the residents love having the horses kind of sneak in every day before or once a week to say hi to the residents. If you look at the picture in the mirror, there is clearly some horse exploitation going on, but we'll leave that for another session. So. And then just finally, real quick, what we've seen from an IN2L standpoint, people tiptoeing back into group activities. We have different ways that we deliver our technology, but it's great to see some of these things starting to happen. The picture on the left is a small group exercise, and the lady on the right is, again, a woman that struggles with sight and loves to be able to have access to a larger screen for her spirituality. And we've spent a lot of work in the next slide having our tablets available, so each person has their own individual experience. And the last picture I had here was just just the heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time, how people are able to stay connected with technology. It certainly doesn't replace the hug of your daughter being there, but it's a heck of a lot better than nothing. And my own perspective is the whole issue of engagement and investing in that technology. It was, for many years, from our standpoint, it's been looked at as somewhat of a luxury. All of a sudden, we're seeing it as something that is not a luxury anymore. It's a demand. And both Dave and Kevin have been way ahead of the curve on that, invested in our technologies and other technologies that really speak to the residents. So with that, I want to turn it over to the stars of the show. So Dave, let me start with you. Just on a gut level, what have the last few months been like for you?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody, or good morning if you're on the West Coast, I suppose. And before I jump into that, Jack, I have a confession or admission to make. I realized once I saw that opening slide that had the promo shots of you and Kevin and me, I'm wearing the exact same outfit that's in that picture. And so all I know about that is that had to have been a Thursday when that picture was taken, because this is my Thursday outfit. So just everybody knows that was intentional, so that you would recognize me even more easily. So again, good to be with everybody. Well, like everybody else, of course, it started as sort of chaos back in March and April, and then transitioned into sort of a different pace for a while. And now, as we see cases starting to rise again, we're sort of getting back on that I wouldn't say crisis mode footing, but certainly sort of dialing back in with significant focus on where we're at. And really early on, and I know members on the phone, any provider on the call today would relate to this. We were just trying to make sense of everything, right? I mean, things were changing so rapidly, and trying to identify what our response needed to be, and then trying to determine what the right strategies were to mitigate and to contain and to do all these sorts of things we talked about back in March and April. And in many ways, we look at technology as an accelerant to strategy. That's always been how we viewed technology. The technology in and of itself is a tool. It is not the strategy. It's a tool of strategy. And in the sort of classic words of Jim Collins in Good to Great, it's an accelerant of strategy. And so I think for us, getting clear about what the necessary tactics and strategies were and continue to be helps us to get clear about what technologies can be helpful for us or for those that we're trying to serve. And so from sort of a logic model, that's sort of how we've come at it, and particularly in this time of COVID.
All right, I'll get back to you in a second with a couple more specific questions, Dave. So what about you, Kevin? What, just kind of in general, what has the last 6-9 months been like for you?
Yeah, well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here with you and I appreciate the invitation. So, pretty similar to what Dave described. It's quite honestly, it's almost like one day you're operating normally, the next day your whole world is upended. And, I think one of the really, really tough things that everyone has had to navigate is every day it's like there was a new mandate come out, a new procedure to follow. And that's probably been the toughest for our staff. It's certainly been the toughest for our residents and family members, because again, they were coming in to visit and all of a sudden, boom, we have to put the sign up saying you can't come in anymore. And that's where the technology piece has really come into play, is to keep our residents and families engaged. One of the things that we're continuing to struggle with is, again, the difference between what's happening on the federal level versus the state level. Washington State has had a much stricter guideline in terms of interaction with residents and families, whereas the feds are really trying to open things up, and we're struggling. We're caught in the middle because these family members are hearing one thing, we're telling them another, and they're wondering, who do they really believe? So again, we're doing everything we can, and you're going to see some examples in a little while of how we are keeping that engagement level high, how we're keeping that communication high, and really trying to keep people connected. I have a couple examples to share of things that happened that weren't necessarily technology based, but we use technology to share it with everybody. And I look forward to sharing that with you. But it's certainly an interesting time. And again, appreciate folks like you and others who have helped us navigate through this.
Well, Kevin, what would you say, from maybe a core strategy that's already part of your organizational mojo? What's something that's been, that technology has accelerated through that? And I see Dave's head pop up there. So Dave, you can go ahead and answer that one.
Well, so I think, we have, in addition to our senior services work, we also do child welfare and substance use recovery work and so forth. So we were confronted with a very decentralized model of service delivery, with everything being shut off all at once and needing to pivot to video everything from, connecting grandma to her grandkids as a strategy to keep them engaged. But also in our foster care division and in our substance use recovery work, moving to clinical video, essentially telehealth, if you will. All of that had to happen and did happen for us within about a week. We were buying tablets and taking donations left and right and repurposing them to get into the hands of people.
Was your staff terrified by that, or they jump into it, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, I would say all of the above, right? Everything was coming at, Kevin made the point and he's right on, everything was coming at us new mandates and new expectations. And so I think one of the things we learned is that we're a lot more flexible and nimble than we thought we were. We got things done in weeks that under normal circumstances literally would have been a 9-month task force project within Wellspring, and we stood these things up in 7, 8, 9 days. And so I think one of the things we've learned is that as we've applied technology, not only does it accelerate our strategy, we've learned to accelerate the implementation and uptake of that technology. I think we're applying some new thinking to that, in the sense that we can move a lot quicker and therefore get a lot more value out of these things than sort of the old model that we were operating under.
Yeah, it's for my own background, I spent 15 years working in the Silicon Valley world, where things did happen quickly, but a lot of times some of the ramifications weren't thought through. And it's been fascinating. And usually the senior living world moves a little bit slower, right? But it has been fascinating to see. I think, as you said, it's you don't have any choice, and all of a sudden people kind of figure it out. So
yeah.
Kevin, I'm gonna go hop back to you, Kevin, for a second. There's a lot of different ways people are using technology and are focused on it. Some of the things we were bringing up was communication, engagement of families, staff support, clinical delivery. You know, if you look at any of those 4 things, is there anything that kind of comes to mind that you've prioritized during the pandemic?
Yeah, a couple of those. Actually, we touched on all 4 of them, Jack. But the 2 that I will at least share about today is, you know, and I already referenced it earlier, is the engagement of families and residents. You know, we have always been known as a community organization. When you look at other life plan communities like Tacoma Lutheran, we are what I call inverted, where the largest part of what we do is their skilled nursing. And when we opened back in 1938, and we've continued this practice, we don't just serve our residents that live in independent living or assisted living, we serve the community. And so we've always historically have had a lot of people on our campus on any given day. And as I said, to basically, you know, shut the gates was tough for everybody. Was tough for our staff, tough for our residents and families. So again, this, you know, I love Dave's thought about how, you know, realizing how nimble you actually can be. We had to do that as well. One of the things that we did was we upgraded our internet pipeline because we realized, boy, we just could not make it happen without that. And ever since then, all of our residents, you know, whether they live independently, live in our cottages or whatnot, you know, now they're able to have that interaction. It's not the same as in person, but at least they still have the contact.
And that is a great point, just because I think people you get enamored with the outcome of the technology, but if you don't have the infrastructure to support it, then they're not going to be able to do it. So this is a technology presentation, and we are close to an election. So isn't it appropriate that we actually do a poll? And I think this will be very non-controversial compared to other elections that maybe happen in the next week or so. But we have a poll question that's coming up, and we're asking people to just right away give a quick click as to what's the most relevant, which strategy has technology helped the most for your organization during the pandemic, and that's communication, engagement of families and residents, staff support, and clinical delivery. And I feel like the CNN guy that's like pointing to the different graphs and things all at once as they're popping up. Look at this. Communication is, if it was a horse race, communication is in the lead. Okay, polling is closed. The winner is communication, coming in at 66%. Engagement of families and residents at 29%. Staff support, you know, it shows there is 0. And you guys can certainly speak to this more than I could, but it really feels like if you implement the technology the right way, and at least for the kind of work that we're doing, it makes the staff's life a heck of a lot better if the technology is supported the same way, and then clinical delivery. You know, it's interesting. For my own 21-year perspective of this is that from a technology standpoint, clinical technology was always so much more prioritized than some of the engagement, and it's fascinating to see this. So, start with you, Dave. Any comments on seeing the survey? Any thoughts, surprises, or is it what you would have expected?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Communication jumps, you know, sort of to the top of the pile for a lot of reasons, and the least of which was part of our jobs, I think, in leading our organizations, particularly during that time, was to make sure that people felt like we were being attentive to the situation, and the only way to assure them that we were doing that was to be communicative with them. I will say I'm a little surprised that there wasn't any sort of vote for the staff supports, which is interesting to me, because my guess is, and you sort of touch on this, Jack, my sense is that many of the members on this, on the seminar today did lots of things in the area of staff support, maybe not so technology centric, but attending to staff was part of it. We've done a couple of things, and I'll talk about them later, in the area of staff support, specifically leveraging technology that seem to matter a lot. And I would just tie it back to great communication in times of crisis is in fact staff support, because primarily to me, they're our primary audience, and caring for them with great communication is in fact supporting them.
Okay, any comments, Kevin, from your side?
No, I'm not surprised about communication at all being the most, or voted on the most. And I agree with Dave. The staff support, I was actually starting to talk about earlier, some things we've done with our staff. One of the things with all that's happening, and we know staff have incurred extra expenses during this time as well, is, we have a program called Pay Active. Some of our listeners may be aware of that, but it's where they can access pay that they've already earned, up to a maximum amount per pay period. And it's an app that's on their phone. And basically it gets deposited either later that day into their account or the next day. And so we, have had the opportunity to help our employees out that way. But especially with all that's happening in the confusion, that communication piece is just so critical, because as I said, families are hearing one thing in the communities, they're maybe reading something different locally, and they're hearing something from us. So it's really, really important that we keep everyone up to date. And that includes the staff. Everything we sent to families, we sent to staff. So they were aware of the information that was going out also.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then if anybody has the poll still up there, you can X out of it and keep going if you want to keep seeing people's faces. It's up to you. You might want to leave it on there. You can do that, choose to do that as well too. So
That's right.
Yeah, no, it has been, for me too, and we'll get on to you guys in a second. But one thing that I've seen interesting is that everyone talks so much about staff and their comfort with technology and their ability or their interest in implementing things and how it's all helped. We've seen a huge uptick in residents that have been historically reluctant to embrace technology, that when they figure out, hey, this is the only way I can talk to my granddaughter, all of a sudden their pace of acceleration it accelerates as well. So I think it really has been interesting to see the changes both from staff and from residents. So
yeah.
Want to move a little bit towards you guys talking getting a little more specific about some of the things happening in your community. Kevin, going to start with you. You both mentioned just how the technology has helped your communication efforts. So just, go ahead, Kevin, just start giving some examples and stories of how you've embraced it at Tacoma Lutheran.
Yeah. Ashley, can you move to the next? Okay, so this is a program called SARA, Situational Awareness and Response Assistant. And we actually implemented this as a way, it's almost like, it's a pendant that residents push if they need assistance. The really cool thing about this is, while it lists all their demographic information, their name, their apartment, it actually also indicates where they are at when they pushed it. So staff are not running off to their apartment or their room to check on them. They're actually going to where they are. But they've expanded this program, and what it allowed us to do is to send real-time messages to family members or anybody. And you can see in the bottom part there, we can actually group it and we can target certain audiences of residents on our campus. So again, if it was something that was only affecting health center residents, we could check that box and it would only go to them. So, it's easy to get overwhelmed in this day and age with information. So we wanted to be really selective of who we were sending this information to. Likewise, it also keeps a log for us, so we know who was sent to the who the messages were sent to, when they were sent, and it's all done again via. All we needed was either phone numbers. It could go as a text, or it would go as an email if we had that. And the family members have been great about providing us with that information. So that's been a real boon, and residents have appreciated that. Jack, one of the things you all didn't hear before we got started is Jack said, "Oh, I'm going to probably have to cut you off, Kevin, because I know how you are." With that, there's only allowed for 3,000 characters, so I could always tell if my memos were too long, if it wouldn't fit on that. So that's kind of a self-check in place as well. But we've really, as I said, started out as a resident response device, and we turned it into a communication tool for families. The next screen. So this is, again, an IN2L system, and you can see our residents are actually running this. This is when things were just starting. And again, this is in one of our licensed areas on our campus. And so people had to stay in their rooms. So what we did was we brought out a resident volunteer who lived on that floor, and one of our staff members there, she was calling bingo with IN2L. But again, it's almost contactless or touchless, but yet residents still, they could open their doors and stay in their doorways, and they could still participate. And we did a lot of that in our health center as well. But again, something, and I know a lot of people think, oh my gosh, we're still doing bingo. It actually is very popular. So this was, again, the new era of how we do bingo. It's all electronic now and technology based. This was one that one of our residents was celebrating her birthday, and this was when we were able to move to outdoor visits. So you can see, if you're wondering, the emblem is there, that's Oregon State. So her family was outside, and then she was also on the screen with other family members where they could celebrate her birthday. And this is a lot of what we did. Now, to Jack's point about, seniors embracing technology, look how many computers she has sitting in front of her there. And if you look at the desk kind of in the background, you'll see another monitor. So now you can understand why we had to upgrade our internet capabilities, because people were embracing this and they're using multiple devices. We have a lot of people on campus that have tablets, they have their phones, they have computers, laptops, all of that. One of the great things that we've been able to do too, we all of us are very much aware, especially those of us that have skilled nursing facilities, of the fines that we get. And Leading Age Washington, our state association, has done a great job of putting a grant program together that allowed for us to purchase a great deal of technology. We were able to purchase two 70-inch screens that we can move around our health center for residents to access, both in a group setting or, again, if they have vision impairment, individual setting. And so that's been really, really helpful for us. As much as we hate to be fined, at least CMS is doing some good with that money. The last slide, Ashley, if you could put this up. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So, in terms of, budgets, we have high budget programs, we have low budget entertainment programs. And as you can see, this is one of our low budget entertainment programs. Our good buddy, Jack York, God bless him, was doing a telethon to benefit an organization in Africa, Cameroon. And I just couldn't basically resist putting this up here just to show you that in spite of all that's going on, we do have a lot of fun with putting this together.
Dave would look real. That hat has got Dave written all over it.
So these are just some examples. I mean, things that we've used, they've kind of been referenced. If you go onto our website, onto our Facebook page, you'll see a lot of things. We actually had a wedding on our site here. Granddaughter was getting married, grandma was upset. And so she came on site, and she and her husband were holding hands through the window. She was able to have her phone where she could hear the ceremony. He was part of the Tacoma Fire Department. Fire truck showed up, and with lights flashing and a show of support. I mean, it's just really creative things like that. So thank you for the opportunity to share some of that.
And that was, I love that picture, Kevin, of the girl. It's so bizarre, but it's so cool to see that kind of creativity. And IN2L was really, we were very excited to be a big part of the grant, the CMP grant that Kevin was talking about. And if you do have any questions about the CMP grant process, whether it benefits IN2L or not, we're very attuned to that. and can help point you in the right direction in your own state if you have any questions. But it's unbelievable the amount of money that's out there. And the other comment I would make before I turn over to Dave is that there are a lot of organizations and individuals and foundations that historically have not been willing or not been interested that much in donating to senior living. And they're seeing the same stories on the news of families not talking. There's a lot of acts when obviously you guys are really struggling with your budgets and the PPE and everything getting hit left and right. But I think that there's a lot of creative funding out there as well in maybe non-traditional sources. So thanks, Kevin. That was great. Dave, take it away.
Yeah, so thanks. Ashley, you want to hold the slides for just a minute? I want to say a couple of framing sort of remarks, if I may. Yeah, thanks. So, I want to go back to this sort of link between great communication and the support of our staff. And one of the things we did early on, we made an observation, let's say, that as we were watching the COVID pandemic growth sort of roll across from the East Coast towards us here in the Midwest, obviously New York, New Jersey sort of led the way with what was to come. Michigan was only slightly behind them. In fact, we were third in the nation behind New Jersey and New York in number of cases and deaths and so forth for quite some time, particularly in March and April. And so we were very much in that front line. But what we noticed was when there was negative press about what was going on in nursing homes, it tended to come from scared and disgruntled staff or disconnected and scared and disgruntled families who went to the press, went on social media, and triggered just really bad press and bad stories, and frankly, probably not even all truthful kind of stuff. So we watched that coming at us, and we made a strategic decision to communicate directly and as transparently as we could with the broadest audience we could. And the way we did that was we decided that we would do Friday videos that were low budget, but allowed us to, and it allowed me to speak directly to staff. So the audience that we were talking to was staff, where we could update them, talk about how we were doing on PPE procurement, reflect on challenges, reflect on some things, some good things that had happened. But we decided to release those publicly on Facebook. So we were talking to our staff, but we were sharing it with anybody who cared. And what happened was that became a real connection for our families who felt like we were taking such good care of our staff that they could relax because they cared about how our staff were doing. And so there's this sort of connecting the dots of being committed to serving your staff and how that affects families. Now, had we done that in a vacuum and families wouldn't have known we were doing that, we would have missed an opportunity there to strengthen those relationships and so forth. And so the technology isn't necessarily new, right? I mean, shooting some videos and putting them on Facebook certainly isn't new, but using that technology to broaden the audience and again, accelerate that strategy of strong communication was sort of the lesson learned there. And even now, when you see press stories about nursing homes and assisted living and whatever, it generally involves somebody who's unhappy with what's been going on and has gone to the press on their own. So just something to think about there. So we did a number of things early on, and so we can pop to those slides, Ashley, if you could, and go right to that second one. One of the things we heard early from our field leaders, and again, we're a very distributed organization. We're in 50 of Michigan's 83 counties, and so we heard from our field leaders that, particularly in our skilled nursing and assisted living environments, that housing for our staff during the pandemic was going to be an important thing, where they could get away from their families to protect them, but still stay available to work. And so we use a program called We Care Connect, and it allows us to do what we call push polls. And so rather than just start running around trying to developed strategies for staff housing during the pandemic, we took a pause and we said, we'll do a push poll. Within 48 minutes, we could get, 48 hours, I'm sorry, we could get direct feedback from staff about, is this really a need? And you can see from this slide that this is actually just one of our facilities among many that we did it at. So it's not the entire universe here. But you can see only a handful said yes. The vast majority said no. They didn't need housing. So it's a great example of using that technology for us to gain a better insight into what was really needed. We could have spent 2 weeks running around trying to figure out how we were going to provide housing to staff that didn't need it. Now, the other thing I would point out is if we go to the next slide, we had the same scenario starting to brew with childcare as the pandemic began to wear on a little bit into weeks and months. We heard the same thing. So we did another push poll about do you need childcare? Now, what's interesting about this slide, if you read the question at the top, it's talking about the pandemic, resolving basically if it continues over the next several weeks. So that just shows you a little bit of how delusional we were back in April here, thinking, okay, a couple more weeks, hey, we'll be out of this thing, no problem. But as you can see, again, from the slide, the technology, this push poll, gave us the opportunity to really look at data and say, are we solving the right problems, right? Because we have limited resources. We have both in terms of manpower and dollars. If we're gonna run around trying to fix childcare for people, we better make sure it's a real problem. And in the end, interestingly enough, it wasn't. And so for those few that needed some childcare support, we decided to do direct, essentially stipends for them to help them, and not try to solve. You can see we had some 390 of our employees that took this poll say no, they didn't need it. So, but interestingly enough, shortly after these were done, when I'm in facilities, I had people, some of our staff thanking me for asking the questions, right? I had a 70-year-old housekeeper who's been with us 30 years who stopped me in the hall and said, I don't obviously need childcare anymore, but it was so touching to me that you would ask that of the younger staff, right? And so, and she wrapped it up by saying, thanks for taking such good care of us, right? This is in the middle of the pandemic. So communication and the use of technology to really understand the data is a good example. Now, the next slide, I'm going to pivot and talk about what we've been doing clinically. Some of you may know this technology. Some of you may have it. This is VirtueSense.
A couple more minutes, Dave.
What's that?
Just a couple more minutes, just to try to. I'm supposed to be the hard guy moderator. So VirtuSense is a falls prevention technology. It measures gait and other sort of core strength of residents. We've been using this a ton during the pandemic, and certainly as we've been able to open up a little bit, because we know that we've seen a lot of decompensation among residents, particularly in AL and IL, and more so even than nursing home. And so fall risk has gone up, muscle wasting has happened, and so we've been able to apply this technology on a person-by-person basis to develop a sort of a rehab, a strengthening program for each individual. Families love the fact that we have this and are doing it, of course. So just another example of us applying some technology in a very specific way at this time. And I yield the rest of my time back to the chairman.
Jack, this is Charlotte. I have a question for Dave and Kevin, which is, once we get past the pandemic, or into post-pandemic, how do you see the need for this technology? How do you see it evolving? Kind of what have you learned that you're carrying forward into the future? And everybody should feel free to put their questions into the chat box.
Well, so from my perspective, everything we're doing now that we've implemented to sort of support our folks and to get through the pandemic, the need for that is not going to change. And so I think one of the things I've been doing with our organization is trying to make sure that we don't take our eye off that ball and that sort of laser focus on effective strategy and not fall back to sort of a malaise around, well, if we can just get back to normal, right? Everybody talks about the new normal. I've actually thrown that out. We don't use that language here. We talk about not new normal, but a new world that we're moving towards. And we have to question everything to get there. Technology is going to play a huge role in that for us.
Yeah, I agree, Charlotte. It's sort of like the genie is out of the bottle now and it's not going back in. You know, technology, again, we want to keep reinforcing technology as a tool. And what I see happening is people are so much craving that personal touch that, you know, we're going to rush to just, you know, Zoom's going to get tossed, you know, turned off for a while. But eventually, when you look at how we're using this, I mean, it's an efficiency that we can utilize to carry out our missions, whether it's through telehealth. I mean, when my residents first started having to use telehealth, oh my gosh, did they complain about it? But now they're so used to it, it's like, hey, I love this. I don't have to, you know, worry about getting my breakfast and getting dressed up and going out. All I do is sit in front of my computer and I talk with my doctor, and it's actually face-to-face time. Mm-hmm. So that, I think, is going to continue as well. You know, communication, I think Dave has certainly stressed this, and hopefully I've communicated this as well. You know, with our employees, it's critical. You know, I think a lot of us are facing issues where trying to find people, not only people, but the right people to do this and to carry out these missions. And so again, making sure we're taking care of them, we're supporting them. And that could be both through technology or you know, what we refer to as low tech. The families, quite honestly, I think we've all made a point of communicating with them and trying to keep our residents engaged. And I don't think we're going to be able to go back from that now. They're going to expect that same level of engagement and communication. And that's not a bad thing. That is not a bad thing at all. So that's at least what I see and what we're focusing on here as well.
You know, from our standpoint, from an IN2L standpoint, what we're fascinated about, and we've been working on this conceptually for a couple of years, but like you guys, we also accelerated things because of the pandemic. But we love the idea for the last couple of years of affinity groups, of people that who were guys that were in the same battalion in the Vietnam War, who were people that went to the same church locally. And I think there's all kinds of really cool ways, as people do get comfortable with this kind of odd way of communicating, that'll be really, you know, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're chatting with 5 people that could be in 5 states that have a whole connection spiritually, music, whatever it may be. And I think that there's all kinds of ways to look at that. And I know, you know, for me personally, I have 3 kids. One's in Louisiana, one's in LA, and one's in Washington, DC. At least once, if not twice a week, we're doing our own we're playing a board game remotely and doing things we never did before. So I think, to your point, Kevin, a lot of these things that are new, they were kind of odd, and now they're becoming the norm, and don't throw it all out when other things get back to normal. So anyway, great insight. We've got, we can keep going. We'd love to see if there's some questions that have popped up in the chat box. I don't know if I'm navigating the right way. If anybody else.
I think there's one. This is Alicia. I think one that kind of came in. If Dave could just speak a little bit more to the push-pull and the reference there to the polling with the employees.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So the We Care Connect technology that we use is an ongoing sort of video, if you will, sort of model of employee engagement. But one of the features they have is an app that is this push-pull, and it allows us to, via text, push out a three question poll and get results almost immediately. We left it open for 48 hours. You could do it any way you want, but it's a quick turnaround. It gives you a snapshot right in the moment. But the We Care Connect is a bigger program, if you will, a bigger platform. The push polls are a part of that.
All right. Any other questions in the chat? I mean, I can keep asking questions if anything else that's popping up in there.
I see one question about for some of our smaller members who may not have the kind of infrastructure support that the two of you have. What suggestions do you have in terms of making use of technology? So for example, I think Jack mentioned, people giving free tablets and things, but there may be no support behind it. So what would you suggest for them?
Yeah. Kevin, you want to take that, or you want me to jump in?
Go ahead.
All right. Well, let me give it a shot here. So, I mean, I think the opportunity for smaller organizations does lie in finding the right community partners that can help you, right? So we didn't have any trouble finding folks who were willing to give us laptops and tablets that could be repurposed. We have an IT department that can do that, but I have no doubt that had we needed it in any given community, we could have found an IT provider under those circumstances who would have partnered with us on that. So I think the creativity of reaching into the community and finding partners is available, and I think that a lot of times smaller organizations have many times deeper roots in those communities, and so I would just encourage you to find friends and find partners that will help you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Again, there's a lot of government agencies too, whether, it's local area agencies on aging or, even LSA. I mean, Charlotte, I've, over the years that I've been here, I've watched all the emails go out where you have said, hey, here's a resource for you. Let's, if you need this, certainly reach out to them. So if these smaller, more rural members are looking for that, I would start with whom they belong to, whether it's LSA or other associations, and again, the local government, because quite honestly, these organizations are going to be viewed as so critical to providing services and programs to a segment of the population that is vulnerable. You look at LSA, we provide those services both on the child and family side and on the senior side. And so the community is going to recognize that, and they, as they say in the fund development world, I didn't get that donation because I didn't ask. So you need to make that ask, and the resources are there.
That's a personal comment to me as well, because the whole way IN2L started was in 1998. A friend of mine, I was living the good life in the Silicon Valley, and a friend of mine reached out to me and said, hey, would you donate some money for some computers at a local assisted living community? And I had never even thought about it, but I had money and no time, and she had time and no money, and that's how the whole company started. And I've seen, one quick example of CCRC in, excuse me, Dave, a life plan community in Oregon. They reached out to just a real rural area, Willamette Valley in Oregon. They reached out to the lady that owned the chocolate shop in the downtown Main Street, and she makes the chocolate in the back of her store and sells it in the front. She donated 100 packets of chocolate for the residents and did a live stream of how do you make chocolate from the back of the room. I think it's an incredible time to reach out to people that you've never reached out to. And especially business folk, because there's organizations like us. IN2L has, the pandemic has been a really good thing for our company. It's brought to the forefront what we do. There's companies that are doing well, and they want to do something that matters. So I would be fearless in going after local businesses and tell them your story, and you'll find people that want to support it. For me, it's turn off cable news and just go talk to people, and you'll see the goodness. So go ahead, Charlotte. I know you wanted to say
I was just going to say, along those lines, given some of the media spotlight on senior living facilities in the past, I'm curious how you, Dave and Kevin, have lifted up some of the bright spots during the pandemic. And I love to talk to David about sharing your staff input into the social media as well, but sorry, Kevin.
No, that's okay. So I think, I can't remember if it was Jack or Dave earlier had said, a lot of these technologies have been around for a while, and that's really what we've used. Facebook is something that oh my gosh, we're doing so much posting on it now because we're trying to do exactly what you just said. What are those bright spots? Likewise with the FaceTime or Skype, so that the families can see the residents are being cared for. When we we're now doing video tours because we can't bring people on campus to tour, and we've actually did move people in during this time, but because they can't come in to see it. I heard a story just yesterday about somebody who's talking about his brother who bought a car. He said he was just blown away by the fact that he bought a car without actually ever stepping foot in a showroom. It was all done virtually, and they delivered the car to his house. And it's very similar here as we're doing these video tours so people can see, hey, there is a lot going on here. And there's a lot of good things going on. And then the messaging, you're absolutely right. When things came out, unfortunately, about these stories that just were really not accurate and very sad, boom, we went to work, and right away we put out a message about what was happening here to show that this isn't accurate. We were very careful. We didn't slam the reporter, but we did talk about what we were doing to address that. So we use these things that have been around for a while, and they are very effective.
Yeah, and from our perspective, Charlotte, on that issue, we focused early in that communication piece on highlighting the stories of staff and how they were showing resilience and really living the mission. And in fact, in late April, we launched sort of a internal mini campaign that turned very external very quickly, that we titled "Essential Workers, Eternal Purpose," to really highlight the fact that our workers, while dubbed essential by the world, are doing so because they have an eternal purpose in the work they do. And that was our way of really honoring our staff. But that quickly, we put a video together for that and started using that in a lot of our materials. And it went pretty far in terms of social media and local press, because there was just a hunger for to lift up those bright spots and in the midst of a lot of darkness, to share good stories of hope and purpose in people's lives. And I think from our staff's perspective, I think they felt honored by that, which is what we had set out to do, was support them.
Charlotte, just real quick, I was going to ask you from the association standpoint, what has it been like for you the last 6-8 months, and in terms of your members and communicating and such?
Well, I was just going to add on to David's comments, because we took his video, which was terrific, and promoted it on social media and our website as well. So one of the things that we've been doing, among many, is spotlighting every single day a story of a frontline hero about the network, because of the incredible work that's being done all across the country by a network that works with 1 in 50 Americans. And that's across the service span, whether it's children, youth, and families, serving people with disabilities, seniors, homeless, veterans, refugees, across the board. So one of the things that we've been doing, and really invite you all, everybody on the phone, to share with us the stories of frontline heroes, because we think it's critical to lift up those bright spots and to make sure that people really recognize that. In fact, if you go on our website, we even have a 2-minute video one of our students did this summer, and then we put the stories that we did this summer together in a digital booklet, and we'll be coming out with one in the fall really shortly. So thank you for that work that you're doing. I saw another question in the chat box around staffing and kind of the learning curve around staff using technology, and how you all have addressed that as part of implementing some of your initiatives. Have you found that there's a learning curve?
Dave, you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say very quickly, we have not found that to be a challenge. There was a urban legend within our sort of executive ranks for a while that a lot of our frontline staff didn't have technology at home, didn't have smartphones, didn't have. The reality is, everybody has that stuff, and our staff, frankly, are not the rate limiting step in technology implementation. I think when we implement technologies into the workflow, we have to be, that's a different change management than implementing things like texting blasts so that we can get information and so forth. But we've just not seen technology sort of a challenge for our staff.
Yeah, I would agree, Charlotte. Our staff have embraced it. We've actually used it in our clinical setting for many years. And we even, a few years back, we had what we call the technology house or a smart house, where we showed all these different devices to help people live a bit easier. And I have to say, it kind of went by the wayside for a bit, but now it's making a resurgence. But overall, our staff have done really, really well with it, and we just have not had any issues.
Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for participating with us today. Jack, thank you. Thank you and your organization for working with our membership and for hosting and sponsoring the webinar today. Thank you to Dave. Thank you to Kevin for the incredible work that you do each and every day. I did want to invite everybody online to our next Strength and Service series, which will be our very own Hector Colon, who's the president and CEO of Lutheran Social Services of Wisconsin and Upper Michigan. We'll be hosting a book launch for him on December 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So again, thank you to everybody. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate it. And thank you for everybody for joining us today.
Thank you.
Dave, your sport coat is great. Just stay with it. Stay with it as long as you like.
Yeah, call me next Thursday. I'll have it on again.